Also today, what are we talking about? Well, there's a warning that Waverley could become a free-for-all for housing developers. The borough needs thousands of new homes in the next 20 years, but the council wants many of them to be built in neighbouring boroughs like Rushmore, and they should take many of them, they say. Planning inspectors now telling Waverley it should rethink its entire housing plan. Jack Fien is BBC Surrey's political reporter. He's been to the village of Milford near Godalming, where new housing near the hospital has just been approved.
Plans to build 104 new homes on land around there were approved on Tuesday night. It's a plan that provokes a mixed response from people living and working here.
I just think it's far too many for the access roads to it. The roads are narrow, just country lanes, and the volume of traffic, no, it's just not on.
So don't get on with it. Build the houses. People need somewhere to live.
The roads are very narrow into Tuesley Lane, and I don't know, they'd have to make a totally different system to accommodate all the cars and people.
You're always going to have this problem. Somebody's going to object about something, and it doesn't matter what the topic is. Somebody, you can bet your life, will object to it.
I'm here at Tuesley Lane. We're here at Milford Hospital, in fact. So the new properties are going to be built to the south and east of here. Kathy Smyth is from the local branch of the Friends of the Earth. Kathy, can you just describe what we have in front of us just here?
This is one of the last available brownfield sites outside the major settlements, which we're aware of. The sites that are causing real concern are the greenfield sites, because once you've used up a site like this, you're looking at greenfield. What the council got wrong was that they didn't understand that the most important thing they had to do, and they had to start with, is what is called a robust evidence base of housing need. What they tried to do was justify the housing numbers based on the capacity of the area and the landscape constraints to accommodate that housing, and that's just not what the government expects to see.
Why is it a bad thing that this plan is now at risk, and why is it a problem if the council doesn't have one?
It means the National Planning Policy Framework will now govern the planning in this area, and it means that there is going to be something of a planning free-for-all, because developers have already identified sites, they've got option agreements. I'm expecting those sites, a lot of them around Farnham, and big debate around Cranley. The sites that I think will come forward first are the ones which are not in the green belt, but they'll come forward in an uncontrolled way.
Where should houses be built in Waverley, in your view?
That's also quite a difficult one, because at the moment we don't know how many homes we're talking about, but let's assume it's a far larger number than the number the council put forward, which was 230 houses per annum. We would say, and my group would say, let's look again at the potential at Dunsfold Aerodrome. This inspector is saying to them, he's not saying you can save this plan. He is saying to them in that letter, this plan is doomed. Please accept this offer to withdraw and maintain some dignity, and I hope they do that.
If you had a message for Bryn Morgan, who's the councillor in charge of planning at Waverley, what would that message be?
It would be, please withdraw this plan. Let's start afresh. Let's do it properly and let's work together.
Well, we've heard the plea. Let's speak to the man. Councillor Bryn Morgan is on the line. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
You heard what Kathy Smyth just has said there. What's your reaction?
It's not a story I haven't heard before, but it's not one that I accept. We have done enormous amount of consultation with local people to determine how many houses they feel Waverley is able to sustain. It's not a question of just building houses. We've got to build them in places where they will work, where there's the infrastructure as far as possible to support them. We came up with a figure of 230, but that was based on the old regional plan, which suggested 250. Not a mile apart, but that was shot away from under our feet when the government removed and abolished the local plan.
What do you make of UKIP saying that they're worried that Waverley will become a developer's paradise because of your actions?
It's what I would expect from UKIP, totally irresponsible and totally uninformed. They haven't the faintest idea what they're talking about.
The inspector, though, has given you a number of options. He said that withdrawing the plan may be the most appropriate. Are you going to do that?
Withdrawing the plan would be the easiest way forward, I admit. But he's given us 3 options, and I've set our officers busy, our planning experts, to find out what the possibilities are. At the moment, we've not made any decision between all three, although I suspect the first option does not look awfully promising. But we will make a decision about which way to go, and it will be based on factual information, not merely speculation.
Right, one bit, just explain it to me. Waverley, you've suggested that many of the new homes could actually be built in neighbouring areas, like East Hampshire and Rushmore.
Yes.
Have you made assumptions on that? What have the councils had to say?
We have hoped that we would get cooperation from those areas, based on the fact that if you work in an area and live in another, there has to be some kind of compromise about where the housing need lies. In actual fact, we have had some discussion with East Hampshire that might bear fruit in the future, but we've had absolutely no cooperation whatsoever from Rushmore.
So
the inspector did accept, though, that we had made every effort to cooperate, and that was as much as we could be expected to do.
So are you not just trying to shift the problem away from you?
Well, of course. If the problem is caused outside Waverley area, we expect some cooperation in dealing with it from those authorities beyond our boundaries.
And we should mention Dunsfold Aerodrome. The Farnham Society and Friends of the Earth are calling for you to reconsider the land around Dunsfold. Seems to be a logical brownfield site to build homes on, isn't it?
Well, it is and it isn't. It's also an industrial employment site, and there is a case before the High Court at the moment that would allow it, if permitted, would allow it to become a much more active airport. I'm not quite sure where Dunsfold Park Limited are coming from. Either they want industry or they want housing. But there's one thing I have to emphasise. Putting housing all over Dunsfold Park would simply increase the number of houses we would have to find across Waverley. It would not take them away from Farnham.
Well, there are now calls for Waverley to look again at building on the land around Dunsfold Aerodrome, an idea that has been rejected in the past. Andy McCloud is from the Farnham Society. Peter Barker lives in Dunsfold and has campaigned against the development that are there. Andy, I suppose we should start with you first off. What's your view of the plans for houses in the future?
Well, can I say about Dunsfold, actually? I don't want to get into any dispute or disagreement with the people of Dunsfold. Our dispute or disagreement is with Waverley Borough Council. We expect them to come up with a proper plan for the whole area, and particularly including Farnham, and that they've completely failed to do.
Do you think Dunsfold should be considered, though?
Well, Dunsfold is a brownfield site, actually, and Farnham falls within 5 kilometres of the Surrey Heath Spa. And the regulations to do with spas say that you should avoid development within 5 kilometres of the spa for the alternatives. And Dunsfold Park is an alternative. The owner of Dunsfold Park wants to develop that site for housing, and if it's a brownfield site, and there's no reason why that shouldn't be at least seriously considered by Waverley.
They do say there's infrastructure problems, transport links. Are you just trying to push the problem away from you?
Well, in a sense, you could say that, but there's actually far bigger transport problems around Farnham than there are around Dunsfold. I actually looked up the figures for the 281, which is the main road that passes Dunsfold, and that gets about 8,500 cars a day on average, whereas Farnham, actually, we've got 2 east-west roads going through Farnham, and they actually have 50,000 cars a day. And we've got 2 north-south roads which go right through the centre of the town, and they have 25,000 cars a day. So if actually travel is a reason, if transport and travel issues are a reason not to develop, there's actually very strong reasons not to develop in the Farnham area, never mind the issues of the spa.
Well, let's speak to Peter Barker. You've campaigned against developments there in the past, haven't you?
Yes, we certainly have, for many years.
Friends of the Earth, the Farnham Society, opposition councillors, they're all pointing the finger towards Dunsfold as the logical spot. Why isn't it?
Dunsfold and the surrounding countryside is a green lung for Surrey and more urban areas. It's long been recognised as overlooked by an area of national outstanding beauty. Dunsfold Park itself is surrounded by areas of great landscape beauty. It's land beyond the green belt, recognised that it should be preserved for its own sake. It's long been recognised as one of Surrey's remaining glorious areas
It's
that
been
should be preserved for itself.
But it is a brownfield site. There's been an aerodrome there. It's like the green and rolling fields isn't quite the image that some people would get when they go there.
They're looking the wrong way. I think if you ever stand on Dunsfold Airfield and look round you, the only reason Dunsfold Airfield itself is outside the AGLV is because when the planners drew the line, which actually follows exactly the airfield boundary, they thought because the airfield was there, operating for the national interest, producing Harrier aircraft and Hunters before that, that it wouldn't make sense to include it in the AGLV, but you stand there and have a look, and quite plainly it would have been otherwise. The infrastructure problem is a huge one, and McCloud rightly identifies that the 8281 is a little country road. It has rather more than 8,500 vehicles on it, but it's a little country road that goes nowhere apart from a traffic jam at Shelford, a traffic jam at Bramley, another traffic jam at Guildford, and going south.
So let's just get back to what the Waverley Council are saying. What do you make of what the planning inspectors have had to say?
The planning inspector is basically the government's hatchet man, to put it bluntly. The government goes on about localism, i.e. the local people should decide their own destiny. Waverley and Bryn Morgan quite rightly base the Waverley plan on the landscape restraints and the local need. Forever, Waverley is a bit of a dormitory town. It doesn't provide the jobs that people come here, live, commute out. It's not the place to dump a huge settlement. We obviously expect to have, and in fact in Dunsfold ourselves, we have a rolling programme of affordable housing. Every few years we build some more, specifically for local need, for people who live here, not for commuters. If you dump 2,600 houses as were originally proposed, in the middle of Dunsfold, in the middle of nowhere, it's the wrong place. All you're going to do is bring people here that don't really want to be here and then have a huge problem getting out to go to work.
And do you buy into that from Andy?
Well, I only had part of what Peter said, actually, but I mean, I totally respect Peter's view, right to defend his area, and that's what we want to do in Farnham, but there's absolutely no doubt, actually, despite what Peter says, that Dunsfold is a land that's regarded by both the Secretary of State and by the previous inspector as previously developed land. It is actually a brownfield site, and it should be considered for housing. There's absolutely no doubt about that, actually.
Well, we know that this is a game of tennis where the ball's going to go back and forward over the net. Thank you so much for your contribution. It is 17 minutes past 8.